Hi, I'm Marcus Coward, and this is Wake Up New Bedford, and I'm here with Liz Wiley. Liz, thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks. Love being here.
So we left off talking about you now being the new executive director of the Marion Institute in 2019.
Yes.
So what is the difference between an executive director and a CEO? Is a CEO like for a business and an executive director like for a nonprofit?
Yes, yeah, but
okay.
Typically I think that was what it was always in the past. CEOs were businesses, corporate businesses, for-profit businesses, where executive directors were more representative of nonprofit organizations. But there's definitely been a shift recently where nonprofits are using the title of Chief Executive Officer and CEO and stuff, but we still use Executive Director.
Would you mind that title of CEO?
It feels a little bit heavy. I don't know. I don't even really love the title of Executive Director. You know, it's just.
What would you prefer?
Like director. I mean, yeah, it's just a title. Yeah.
Very humble. Very humble.
Had a lot of titles. Yeah.
Sure.
Not, you know.
But you are there's no one above you necessarily.
There's my board.
Oh, the board.
Yes,
I guess.
I have
There's
a
always
board
a
of
board.
directors that are above me, and they
Sure.
are technically my bosses. Yes.
Sure.
I have a fantastic board though, and they pretty much just let me play.
Sure. Well, I mean, especially with your experience with everything that you've done from marine biology to having your, different degrees, and then with working up the, chain of command essentially at the Marion Institute. It sounds like it would be in good hands.
I definitely, through all the careers, went that route of being a program manager to a program director to to becoming an executive director.
And so it felt pretty natural to you. It wasn't something that was too daunting.
It was. I knew after I got my master's degree that I had, that was basically the degree that you would get to become an executive director or to become a, director at all. And it still felt really daunting to me because, the executive director is responsible for the budget.
Sure.
Right there, it's like, math, budgets, not the nitty-gritty stuff that I, thrive at. So it still felt a little out of reach.
Sure.
But the Marion Institute, what it represents and the opportunities that I saw there as the executive director kind of outweighed my fears of becoming the executive director. But I certainly had those fears, and I still do, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so for the people who either do or don't know about the Marion Institute, could you give probably the 3 to 5 biggest things that you guys do or could be known for?
Sure. Well, like I said earlier, we've been a nonprofit organization we're in our 31st year. So we've been around for quite a while.
Absolutely.
And I think what makes the Marion Institute unique is that it's not an organization that just has done one thing.
Sure.
All those years. It's not like we are, a service agency that just supports, youth or this or that. So it's made it confusing for people because they know us through different lenses of different projects and programs that we've run. That being said, we currently are an organization that is focused on health, equity, and community health through the lens of food justice and environmental justice. And we have several programs that we run and operate in-house to do that. And so we have a Grow Education, farm to school program that we do with elementary schools across the South Coast. We're in all of the New Bedford elementary schools.
Wow.
We're in Westport elementary schools, Wareham, and the Old Rochester Regional Tri-Town elementary schools. And so that's a really incredible program. All of our programs try to address food security from sort of different angles. So as I explain these, you'll see how they all start to support one another and support the work that we're doing, right? They reinforce one another.
And before you go on, is it called the Marion Institute because the headquarters is in Marion, or?
I guess so.
Sure. Okay. Just so I can picture it. Okay.
Right. I guess so.
But okay.
Initially,
continue.
when it first started out, it was actually the Marion Foundation, and then it changed to becoming the Marion Institute as they started to bring more programs in house. They started out as the Marion Foundation because they were doing a lot of that fiscal sponsorship of other organizations and less internal programming. And then as that started to shift and we started to do more internal program, running our own projects and programs and hiring our own staff to do that, that's when it shifted to the Marion Institute.
And so when you say in-house, are you talking about going to elementary schools or bringing different students to the building of the Marion Institute?
We go out. We go to the schools.
Yeah,
yes, yes. But I just mean in-house, meaning that the programs that we have are, we fund them, we raise the money for them, we hire the staff for them, and we implement them.
Okay.
Which is a little bit different from the model that the Marion Foundation had, right, when it was the foundation and it was doing more with fiscal sponsorship, where you are an organization that has 501c3 status and an organization comes underneath it that doesn't have 501c3 status, nonprofit status with the IRS, and so they need your umbrella, they need your status to be able to qualify for any grants or donations.
Sure.
So it's an organization that's doing completely different work, and we still do that service. It's a smaller component of what we do at the Marion Institute, but as a nod to the past, we still have a fiscal sponsorship program where we support organizations that are in that don't have 501c3 status yet.
Sure.
Some of them are local here to the city, like Steam the Streets, the Mindful Collaborative, Blessed Arts are a couple of programs that are run by project leaders that are under that umbrella. And then it also allows us to have an international footprint. So some of our greenhouse, we call them greenhouse initiatives in-house, are international. So we have some in different parts of Africa. We have a couple of in India. So it's cool because we're able to then take the pillars of what the Marion Institute represents and have a more global footprint and reach in the work that we do. But then we have our core programs that, like I said, we run in-house and are responsible for in-house. And that's our Grow Education Farm to School program, our South Coast Food Policy Council program, which is really a we bring all the food system stakeholders together to work on policies and projects and programs that are really re-regionalizing our local food system, and that's so important from a health equity lens.
Absolutely.
And then we run our newest program, which is Frogfoot Farm, Neighbors Feeding Neighbors, which is a farm to food relief program.
Okay.
It's out on the Wareham-Plymouth line. It's a 6-acre farm that we're leasing land from AD Makepeace, and everything that we'll be able to grow there will go to food relief. We'll go to food pantries. That location also allows us to start a gleaning program, which is where you train volunteers to become certified gleaners to go to other farms in the region and recover food that would otherwise be wasted in the field.
Okay.
Yes. And so both of those programs are radically going to be transforming how much local food we can get into the food relief systems in southeastern Mass. And those programs really, Frogfoot Farm and the Gleaning Program, came out of the work of the Food Policy Council and our 2021 food system assessment that we published that really identified gaps and priorities for us to focus on in the regional food, to recreate that local food system. And then we have our program called Biomed, and that's really a community wellness program. It's really working to introduce and teach people about health practices that they can do that can benefit them, and their family's health.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's rooted in biological medicine, which is a main form of healthcare practiced in other countries, but it's really rooted in pillars like detoxification, immune building, nutrition. So that you can see how that nutrition, nutritional security lens kind of threads through everything that we do at the Marion Institute.
And so that focusing on food equity and nutrition, did you bring that as the executive director, or was that focus already there before you got there in 2019?
There was always a piece of it, but certainly not to the degree that we have that we've brought it to today.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, when we were running the Connecting for Change conferences, there was always a food and farming track.
Yeah.
We brought on Round the Bend Farm was a program initially, and certainly that was a component of that work. And obviously the part that I was most interested in, because that's the program that brought me into the Marion Institute family, really.
Yeah.
And so, but certainly when I came on board as the executive director, I knew that was my focus. And the reason why, Marcus, is because our founders, the ones that were really into biological medicine and really into that concept of, you know, we should be treating the root causes of disease and illness rather than just treating the symptoms.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And our allopathic world tends to just treat the symptoms, right? Like you have a cold, you take this pill and you get better, right? Whereas biological medicine is more about like, well, why are you exhibiting these symptoms? And what does your body need to do to be able to like come back into homeostasis?
Yeah.
So it's really, like I said, it's really rooted into those pillars of detoxification, right? What do we need to detoxify from? Physically, emotionally, right? All those things that ail us. And then how do we build our immune systems up naturally? And what food should we be eating, right? The food I should be eating might be different from the food that you should be eating, but it is still like, how do we take care of ourselves from that lens, right? And so when I came on board, the founders of the Marion Institute were really interested in wanting to make biological medicine and more predominant in all the work that we were doing.
Sure.
And I felt like I couldn't do that from the lens of, like, to go to a biological medicine doctor or practitioner, you'd have to pay out of pocket, right? It's not covered with health insurance. So to me, that felt very elitist.
Sure.
And wanted to make sure that we were saying, okay, if we take these pillars of detoxification, immune building, and nutrition, and we weave that into all the work that we do, and we make it accessible to the communities we serve, then I felt like I was the right person at the right time to take over the executive director position.
Sure.
And when I said that to the founders when they were interviewing me, they said, absolutely. I mean, because that's really, they are, you know, that's their focus too, right? It's just really about how do we make our communities healthier,
Sure.
right? And this is not like rocket science, right? Biological medicine is not rocket science. It's really rooted in a lot of common practices, like it's common knowledge.
Yeah.
But we don't put it into practice all the time, right? Like, so it's things like making sure that you are drinking enough water, and making sure that you're eating the right foods, and making sure that you're moving your body every day, and making sure that you are, you know, have some sort of mindfulness or spiritual practice, and you know, and then, you know, it grows from there. There's other components, but it's really rooted in those basic things that are free and accessible, but that we are, as a society, not encouraged to tap into all the time, right?
It may seem like common sense, but just because they seem simple and common sense to do, but they're just as important as anything else, if not even more important.
That's
you know,
right.
like they
That's
are
right.
the fundamentals of staying
Right.
healthy.
Right, and we really try to, we always say it's like common wisdom, but not common practice. Like it's common wisdom, but not common practice.
Yeah.
And so we really try to take all of that and weave it into everything else we're doing with all of our other programs.
I think that's super important.
Yeah,
And so your background educationally was in marine biology and in organizational management and leadership. I'm glad I got that. But this knowledge about nutrition, did you feel like you learned a lot of this on the job or independently in your off time?
Probably a little bit of both.
Sure.
I mean, to be honest, going back to my very early beginnings, right, and growing up in a immigrant family, right, where you ate what you grew in the backyard, and you cooked everything from scratch, and you didn't use processed foods, and you didn't eat a lot of junk, right? And you know, that was really deeply rooted into my upbringing.
Sure.
And you know, that's hard to like, and then that's what I did with my family, right? So it was sort of what I was doing, and then looking at, you know, we're not supported very much in doing that, right? And I think that's something that I've always loved about the Marion Institute, is the Marion Institute always opens like new doors and new ideas and new thinking for people. And people come in at different points, and it gives people an opportunity to feel like they have a community around them that's supporting them in that new way of thinking or being, and you know, but wherever it is, right? Like, so if it's from an environmental lens and you're coming in, you're learning about composting or farming, or you know, or if you're coming from a health lens into the Marion Institute work and you're learning about some of these practices that we were mentioning that are common wisdoms, and some like esoteric ones, right? Like lymphatic drainage and the importance of lymphatic drainage and dry brushing and things that you can be doing to move your lymph system, you know. These are all things that people want this knowledge, but they, in the day-to-day lives, don't necessarily feel supported in learning and doing and incorporating into their lives. And I've always thought that the Marion Institute has done a really incredible job of creating that space for people.
Sure.
Certainly back in the days when we were running the Connecting for Change conference, you could see that, you could feel it. The energy at those conferences was just like intense.
Sure.
You know, it was just so many people, like-minded people coming from all walks of life and different cultural backgrounds, and you know, it would just be really energizing.
And they want to take action.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but then Monday morning would come, right? We ran those conferences Friday night, Saturday, all day Sunday. Monday would come, and everybody would go back to their work lives and their homes and their whatever, their regular worlds. And all those things you were turned on to and inspired, you felt like, how do I keep that energy going? How do I keep that learning going? And I think the Marion Institute tries to do that for people, is create that space and to you know, that learning environment and that that mindset. So I find that really like one of my favorite things about working at the Marion Institute.
And that you've been able to grow in this knowledge of nutrition and really make it a part of the curriculum for the students, but also for everyone involved too.
Yeah, and really practicing what we preach, right?
Yeah.
Really making sure that what we're trying to do, we're implementing at every level along the way.
And so we have about 9 minutes left.
Okay.
And so I have a few other big questions.
Okay.
And so just to keep that in mind.
Sure.
So the first one is having to do with sustainable agriculture, local farming, regional food chains more so.
Yeah.
And so would you say that Massachusetts is doing everything it can in order to lead the way in sustainable food, or if you could, or do we have a little bit more improvements to go?
We have a lot of improvements to go.
Okay.
I'm so glad you asked this question.
Me too.
Because it actually really hits on what we're doing right now.
Okay.
There are different parts of New England that are doing a better job of that than others.
Sure.
But in southeastern Mass, we're actually not doing a really good job about it.
Okay, talk about it.
We're not, and so this is a lot of the work that we're doing with the South Coast Food Policy Council, is sort of how do you re-regionalize, right? Re-regionalize a local food system. So I'm going to explain it this way, Marcus. Back in the days of COVID, right, when all of a sudden the grocery shelves were bare, you can get eggs, you can get milk, you can get these things that we've all become very accustomed to going to the grocery store and getting, the large box stores and getting.
Yeah.
People started to become really creative in trying to be like, okay, well, where's my local farmer, and where's my local butcher, and where's my, can I go down to the docks and get fresh seafood? And, you know, we started to find all these ways. During the time of COVID, and this might be my, like, I remember thinking, like, I have been practicing this my whole life, right? I am ready for this because I had all those connections. But one of the things that, so that became really apparent. And then as we get further and further away from the pandemic, people start to go back into going back to the grocery, and the big box stores because it's easier. You get everything you need in one place. And so what's happened is that we have a food system that is really disconnected, right? So we have producers, that's our farmers, our fishermen, our aquaculturists, our ranchers, right? Livestock farmers that are producing food. And then we have our end users, right? We have our consumers, and like right before consumers, you have your retail stores, you have restaurants, you have institutional buyers that are buying a lot of food and making food at like hospitals and K through 12 schools and universities, and right. So you have the people producing the preparing the food and distributing it to the consumers. But in between that, the food. If you really look at the food system from start to finish. You need processors, you need distributors, you need co-packers, you need all these other supply chain parts, right, from one end to the other. And what's happened is all of that supply chain, those middlemen, so to speak, has been outsourced to an industrial food system.
Yes.
Right? And so that's why all of a sudden we were starting to when COVID happened, all of a sudden you were seeing like eggs being thrown out, milk being dumped, because those big industrial players couldn't get down to the size, right, the distribution size that they needed at the local level.
Yeah.
And that is why building that up is so important, because one, we have at this end our producers, farmers, fishermen, aquaculturists that are really struggling, right? We're going to lose that. We're going to lose those producers if we don't support those producers. And so it's not just, go to the farmer's market. Yes, definitely, find your producers and buy from them. That's the first thing anybody can do. But it's also understanding that we need to rebuild that hard infrastructure, that supply chain all along the way. And so the work of the Food Policy Council, the South Coast Food Policy Council, is really addressing that.
Okay.
We work with what we call our Community Advisory Board, or for short we call it our CAB, and it's made up of about 35 food system stakeholders throughout the region in Bristol County. So we try to make sure that we've got really good transdisciplinary approach to this work that we do. We have different sectors represented, we have different regions represented, so that we have all different voices at the table. We work with food equity advisors. Those are individuals with lived experience of hunger to make sure that they are stipend to participate in this work and their voice is being heard. So working very focused, with the Food Policy Council on Bristol County, we've been trying to look at how do we really go about that capacity building that needs to happen? Our CAB works on 4 different working groups, so every CAB member sits on one of our 4 working groups within the Food Policy Council. We have an education and communications working group, and that group is really focused on educating people, right? Educating people about what it needs to take to rebuild this food system and why it's important and why it will be healthier ultimately for all of us. We have our policy working group, which is focused on legislative advocacy and action. We have our food access working group, which is really focused on the emergency food issues that are always happening, that started during COVID and are continuing today and really revving up again today with all the federal cutbacks that we're seeing. And then we have our capacity working group, and it's that capacity working group that's really focused on, well, how do we know what infrastructure to build? What do we do first, right? And what we have found over the last 5 years of running this program is that we have a good sense of what we need, but we also need to work collaboratively with all the other counties in southeastern Mass. Sure. So as you said, is Massachusetts doing a good job? No, we're not really, because we all work so much in silos. Yeah. So this goes back to how do we break down those silos? So one of the things that we're doing at the Marion Institute is we've started to work, and this has been work that we've been working on this past year, is identifying county leads in all the other 5 counties of southeastern Mass. So that's Norfolk, Plymouth, Barnstable County, Nantucket County, and Dukes County, which is Martha's Vineyard, and identifying county leads so that we can then start to work with them to create community advisory boards of food system stakeholders in their counties, And then what we're going to be doing is a community agricultural resiliency auditing of, okay, what are the people, who are the people and the projects and the policies and the programs that you have in your county to really identify all the social infrastructure and to identify how resilient your food system is in your county. And then working collaboratively, taking that, we call it CARROT for short, Community Agricultural Resiliency Auditing Tool, stands for CARROT. So taking that CARROT data that we're going to be collecting from each of the counties and then synthesizing that into our next food system assessment with the goal of publishing that next year. And that's really going to allow us to then start to say, okay, if we really want to rebuild this regional food system and that supply chain from producers to processors to distributors to the end users, right? How do we can't all do it all, right? We can't all build everything. But we can start to identify, like, okay, how many food aggregators do we need? How many co-packing locations do we need? How many food processors do we need? So that we can start to restructure that hard infrastructure that we've outsourced to the industrial food system.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's just a big project we're working on.
For sure.
Yes. Okay. A little overwhelming, yes?
No, yeah. And so we're running out of time.
Okay.
And so I just have 2 more questions.
Okay,
and
I'll be brief.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe 30 seconds for each.
Okay.
So we bring up Ethan DeAguilar,
Yes.
and but for the average person,
Yes.
how can they learn more about what the Marion Institute is doing?
Yeah, I brought up Ethan DeAguilar. We were talking about him earlier because he's just an amazing person, and he's an incredible videographer. He's and he and I are working collaboratively on a project called the Farm Coast documentary. So we're creating a documentary about the Farm Coast, right? Because we want people to understand that it's not just, hey, support your local farmer. That's super important. But it's important to understand, like, if you want to keep this rural landscape, if you want to keep the fisheries thriving in this region, if we want to support our food producers, then you have to understand where the breakdown's happening. So it's really going to be a call to action and a really informative film that we're creating that will really, help to raise awareness of how important this is.
Okay, so look out for this documentary.
Yes, next year. It will be out next year.
Next year, okay.
Yep.
And maybe the website is also a good place to go for information? Or
Yep, I think on the Marion Institute website, underneath the South Coast Food Policy Council, we would have some information there about the Farm Coast documentary that's in the works.
Fantastic. And so last question, again, maybe a minute left.
Okay.
What would be your maybe 2 or 3 big takeaways for people watching this that you'd want them to have?
Yes. We need all voices, right? Our voices are powerful. And it is as daunting as policy seems, it is so important to get involved. And now more than ever, right, it is really important to raise your voice and to get involved some way. So whatever issue is the issue that is scratching at you the most, dive into it. If it's food related, if anything I've said has struck a chord, I hope that people will follow us with the South Coast Food Policy Council, become a member at large. It's free, but that way you'll get these updates, you'll get action alerts from us. We'd love to get more people. We have about 1,200 people in the region signed up that just are focused on that component of what we do. And if you want to get your hands in the soil, we would recommend becoming a volunteer out at Frogfoot Farm and coming out to the farm and leaning in that way. But I think just everybody has a part to play, and we're all consumers, we all eat, and if we really want to see a vastly different situation in 5, 10, 20 years from now, we need to really support a local food system to make that change happen.
Liz, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks, Marcus. You're awesome.
Thank you. You're even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But everyone, that has been Liz Wiley from Somerset talking about her position as the executive director at the Marion Institute. Thank you everyone for watching, and catch us on the next episode.
Yeah. Thanks.
Peace.
I'm running.